learn white supremacy in our schools, how we learn white supremacy in our lifestyles. I can remember being in kindergarten and like going to Xavier's over school, bam bam, best school. Going to Xavier's over school and white tourists walking by and asking to take pictures with us when we were playing in the and like us being like remembering our teachers say to us like white people, not white people, but tourists, and in our heads, tourists are white people. They keep our economy going. So what are you gonna do? Take pictures with the random white people who asked to take pictures with you in kindergarten because it made sense that you are we're so kind. I think that's what I would say. White supremacy, the way that we view whiteness in the Bahamas is in a way where we are kinder to white people and we give Black people in general a harder time. And the question then becomes, do Black lives actually matter in the Bahamas? And it does go back to the Haitians and the Jamaicans who don't fit in that ideal. How do we, it makes me think of like how you have like refugees in America, how they look down on Black Americans when they get there. Because I'm not like you, I'm better than you are. And it's the same way like Haitians come to the Bahamas and it's like, I'm not you, I'm better than you are. We're moving closer to whiteness by putting you down. Oh no, my mind just went to a bunch of different thoughts just there. So I'm gonna leave myself with that.
Marjan, you just said so much, and I'm trying to find this video so I can share it with everyone. But there is a commercial that's currently airing of the Bahamas. I mean, you've probably seen it 10 million times, where there's like the seaplane flying into neighbor King Exuma, which, like, anyways, it just an aside because that's not what Bahamian Islands look like. Like, that island was created by the owners of the island, and I know that because I work for them. Anyways, but so they film there, and it's just like the seaplane pulls up, and then the white man and I think a woman comes out, and then there's these children in uniform running through the coconut trees to the plane. And I'm kind of like, one, if the children are on the beach, why are they in uniform? Right? Like, what is this? What is this message of tourism that you are selling? Because this is what in 2020 our Ministry of Tourism is selling. This is how they sell us. You know, and it just like, it disgusts me every time I see that, because it perpetuates this colonialism, this ideal where we are like, we're here to please, we're here to entertain, you know, and look at the cute little children, Black children in the uniforms, so quaint and whatever. Like, it needs to stop. And we are complicit in these systems. And I going back to your initial question about the only way that we're going to move out of this oppression is for us to learn where we are. Most of us do not realize that we're being oppressed. Most of us, like I was, just up until very recently, fully complicit and like team white supremacy, yay. And so like, this is where education spaces like this, but really helping Bahamians and Black people to find the vocabulary to speak about what we're experiencing is where it comes about. And, you know, taking social justice classes, learning, I mean, we're not taught this. And so we literally have to relearn what it means to be Black, because how we were raised to be Black was with this subconscious belief that we were less than. I mean, and I see it all the time. It makes my skin crawl here in Cat Island, which it's that much more, I feel like we're that much closer to slavery than you guys in Nassau. And all the time I'll see an older Black woman or man say yes ma'am to a younger middle-aged white person, and then the middle-aged white person calls the Black person by their first name. You know, it's these subtle microaggressions that you don't stop to be like, wait, no, like, I'm younger than you, I should be calling you ma'am or sir, right? Even, and that happened with me all the time, and I had to be so intentional because, of course, I don't really, whatever Bahamian looks like or sounds like, I don't fit into that category. And it took a long time for me to, and a lot of intentionality to get people to stop doing that. But we have to unlearn and then relearn what it means to be liberated.
So I'm gonna jump in. Hi everybody, my name is Ava. So two points, just because I'll speak to what Nikita brought up first, just because it's closest to my mind. That in about maybe the second or third transforming spaces, and this is right around the time that this is, I think, maybe Bahamar had just opened or had been was still a concept, but Heino, this artist Heino Schmidt did this. He did this piece for Transforming Spaces, and I'll never forget it. And it's really just a paste up of the poster that they used for Bahamar. It shows the Bahamian, quote unquote, Bahamian Riviera. And the point that Heino made was that's not even how our harbor goes in. Like, they reversed the image to fit. And it just further shows just how much we twist and bend the truth to fit this tourism narrative. And it's really important because tourism for us is so deeply tied to our culture. These sort of, quote unquote, these products, the junkanoo, the conch salad, they are, when you ask someone what do they consider to be Bahamian, it's these same tourism products, right? Or the same things that we also market and stuff. So the truth in who we are and as Bahamians really matters in that way. And that's where we get the major reinforcement for it, right? Because tourism in a lot of ways is validating for us as well, because we use those tourism numbers to say, look, we brought in 1 million, or we brought in 2 million, or we're breaking the record in the region in terms of tourists. So it's tied to our self-worth as well. Going back to how or where Bahamians fit in the Black Lives Matter sort of thing. So just as a bit of a background, like, I'm doing some organizing work right now, trying to put together a solidarity statement, and eventually perhaps, we are going to do a protest or some form of demonstration in solidarity. But also what we've realized, and it may be in part, and it is in part because of the violence that we're witnessing and that we're so close to, but also it's a form of white supremacy and racism why we're opening right now to tourists at a time when the numbers in the US have never been higher. And, we are not taking those steps. It's a big elephant in the room. We've decided and we've accepted from our government that we are just going to put ourselves in that line of fire as if we have no choice or no other real options. Because, again, it goes back to that thing where we're so dependent on tourism. But I liken it to a Black Lives Matter thing and white supremacy, because the issue in the United States is directly related to their inability to get a handle on their own white supremacy, because it's these different factions that they don't care about their Black lives. They don't care about the minorities that live there who are directly and proportionately affected by this COVID-19 disease, and they're poor. And so because of that, and because their lack of respect for their people, now we are in a situation where we don't have any self-respect. And so we are allowing them to come and continue this violence in our country now. And now we are in an environment where we are considering, or where we cannot, have an Independence Day celebration due to the intense, to the risks associated with that. And so in very practical terms, we're seeing how this all plays out and the impact that it has on us. And I wanted to really speak to the point about immigration, because I've covered immigration now. I'm a journalist. I've covered immigration in the Bahamas for 10 years now. And one of the things that has been a mainstay that I've in sort of covering this issue from both sides, because it's not just, we like to say that, it's easy when you talk about prejudice. Issues of prejudice and issues of discrimination are really easy to talk about because it has like a right and a wrong. But in terms of national identity, in terms of citizenship, in terms of immigration, in terms of national security, we are very lax and we don't really have an opinion on those things. And because we don't, we sort of leave it to this wishy-washy gray space. And so whenever someone says, oh, well, I'm not against Haitians, I just feel as though Bahamians should be first, or we should have rights. But we never really talk about what is exactly Bahamian, right? So we know that we have this identity issue. And all these things are really interconnected. But one of the mainstays I've realized is, I think it comes down to is anti-Blackness, right? Bahamians want to be Bahamian because they don't want to be Black. I feel like a lot rooted in our national identity and why there's this resistance to have any sort of regional dilution, or like, that's not even dilution. Is that dilution a word? Anyway, like we don't want to have any diasporic sort of, because we feel like it dilutes our Bahamianness, and if we dilute our Bahamianness, the common thread that's going to come up is our Blackness, right? And so I find that, and it goes back to even what we say to our children: don't go in the sun because you're going to be too black, and you're going to be black like who? A Haitian, or a Jamaican, or someone from further down in the Caribbean, and we don't call these things by their name, and so we never deal with them. And that's the importance of I think that's the real importance of the Black Lives Matter movement, and the importance of where we fit in it, because I feel a lot of Bahamians, because we have allowed these atrocities to be committed against ourselves, by ourselves, like the issue with the coroner's court and police killing of Black bodies here in the Bahamas by the state, and we have sort of accepted because of our high crime. These things are a direct consequence. Our police officers are trained by the United States. We get our highest technical support for national security from the United States. So their white supremacist policies, what we are teaching how can we expect anything different? And I'm sort of, this is like a never-ending conversation, but I really wanted to, my only point would be, until we come to grips with that, until we, look in the mirror and accept ourselves as being Black, because I also noticed that a lot of our imagery is like, I liken it to be like, you're brown enough brown skin. Like Bahamians like to be brown, you know what I mean? Like we're okay, brown is safe. Brown is ambiguous, and brown allows you to be exotic or ethnic, or it's a brown enough brown skin that and an accent like mine that is brown enough, but not too aggressive, not too much slang, not too much, and that's how we train ourselves. We train ourselves to speak in a way that is going to be easy for tourists to understand, but also easy to differentiate us from the rest of the Caribbean as well. You know what I mean? We don't want to have a twang, in a sense. And the only, and sort of the only time it's really, I grew up in a time when Bahamian dialect wasn't celebrated, right? It changes, it shifts. It is being celebrated in ways that way more, and the visibility of Bahamian culture is being celebrated way more. But it's a trend now. It's a trend because Blackness is at an all-time, the sort of the consumption of Blackness is at an all-time high, And so right now there's a trend that I'm noticing amongst my peers, and it's just wider Bahamian society, is as we are coming closer to Blackness, but that's not really what it is. And I think until we start to really, say what we need to say, and like the CARICOM thing, we need an apology first. And until we're ready to hear that apology, and actually, say the things that we need to be sorry for, then I don't feel as though we're going to have any real, because people who are oppressed, or I get the sense that because we feel like we're complicit, we're not saying anything because it would be hypocritical. To hear ourselves speak out for Black Lives Matter in any sort of loud way, whenever you, and even in the conversations online, I'm going to wrap it up here, but if you look at, the arguments that are being had about where Bahamians fit in this Black Lives Matter struggle, most of the people that are like torpedoing or have stuff negative to say about, our inclusion in this are really people who want to preserve our proximity to whiteness. Because who does it serve? And that's what I always go back to. Who does it serve us not saying Black Lives Matter? Who did it serve for us not to say our statement and just slip it in the back end at the UN when they had the urgent debate? Because all we said was, we signed a bunch of treaties, so it's already stated what our position is on Black Lives Matter. But who does it serve by not restating it? And when we answer that question, I think we become a lot closer to what's really going on. I really appreciating all of the discussion. I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Alicia.
I kind of just wanted to jump in there. Hi, everyone. Great discussion. Ava, you said that tourism is integral to our culture. And I viscerally want to rebuke that. I don't want to say that, Junkanoo and conch salad is something that I'm performing for tourism, because they are things that are so, Junkanoo in itself is I think the greatest expression of our Africanness that we could have. And I don't want to believe or just sort of give into this idea that tourism.
I can understand that, but to clarify that, just because I feel you when I hear you on that. What have we done to support it? You know what I mean? The joy that you have from Orchid, the connection that you have with Junkanoo, I feel as though I feel robbed by not having that. And I feel as though we don't there, unless you're directly connected, unless your family has decided or committed themselves to that, I feel is that's not the same experience. That's not a widespread experience, you know? And I feel as though it is. I agree with you. I agree with everything that you're saying. I'm talking about how it's packaged.
No,
Packaged for our people.
I understand that, and I wanted to say more that tourism is integral to our economy because we haven't made enough of an effort to diversify our economy. We haven't made enough of an effort to have ownership and stake in our own country. So of course we continue to pander to sort of white supremacist ideals. Of course have you ever seen Paradise Island at 4:00 at the shift change and you see everybody leaving in their pink and white uniforms? And to me, that's such a graphic sort of representation of the plantation. And we continue, as long as we continue to cater to tourism, particularly to white Americans, not that other people don't come here or white Europeans, but we don't have ownership in the way that we package it. If we are spending our money with the Tourism Promotion Board, which is based in Florida, so they make these crazy commercials with non-Bahamians in them and then have them voiced by someone who is generally Caribbean, who's been living in New York for 10 years and doesn't have an accent that represents us, then we continue to not have ownership over our narrative, over our economy, over our culture. So education, I think, is important to answer Alicia's earlier question, which is that, yes, people don't even recognize that racism is around us constantly. I mean, I've seen so many people in the past few weeks say that we're just trying to jump on the bandwagon and take America's problems as though racism isn't something that exists here, when so many oppressive structures exist here, including the colorism, including the xenophobia towards certain members, particularly of the Caribbean community, but not, oh, this British person is coming to teach at QC at 3 times the salary of a Bahamian person who's equally as qualified. So there's that. There's also the retelling of our story ourselves. So I posted something the other day too. I mean, the history book that I had in high school, which barely talks about even slavery, all of the primary sources are listed as being held by libraries in the UK. So we don't even have ownership of those like historical artifacts that speak to our story as Bahamians. Like, if we don't own it, then how do we sort of build that equality, which is then why reparations is such a exciting sort of concept, even though we'll never be able to have the generational wealth that white people have accumulated over these past few centuries. We'll never be able to catch up to that. But again, that gives us the opportunity to have ownership. It gives us the opportunity to say, you want to have 5 Diamonds International stores downtown, but I have enough money to shut all of them down and open my own uniquely Bahamian product in that space. Like, Christopher Columbus could stay or go as far as like, yeah, but when are we going to get rid of Diamonds International? When are we going to get to the point where there's like real, tangible, not just, oh, we have all these millionaire MPs in the house, but there's actual wealth amongst Bahamians so that we can own our own story, we can create this equality in our own country.
Can I just add on to Orchid's point? I love the point about history, because I don't know if anyone's aware, but on the BGCSE national exam, I just found it on Twitter, there is a question that says, can you list 5 reasons why slavery is better in the Bahamas than any other place in the Caribbean? And I think when you have a question like that on the BGCSE, it's easy to see how Bahamians can see themselves as better than, right? And also, like, I struggle with Bahamian wealth as a conversation, because I think it's easy to look at geography in the country and see where you have folks who are in like the inner city of Nassau, especially, who've never gone to the beach. in certain areas. Like you've never gone to the beach by, I don't know, Love Beach or something like that, or gone out west, because there's like an invisible barrier in your head that you can't go to certain places. And the island's so small, so it's so ludicrous to even think that. And we have a government, especially in the COVID-19 situation, that's not looking at more social investment to show poorer folks and Black immigrants that we can take care of you. And if we can't take care of the poorest like persons in the society who happen to be Haitian immigrants or like just poor Black Bahamians in general, how could we turn around and say we want more for our, how can we say we want more Black wealth if we're not looking at trying to take care of those who are in need of more assistance?
I agree with what you're saying there. And I mean, I think of wealth in sort of super broad terms as well. And part of being wealthy as a nation means that there's social and equitable justice across the board. Like you can't have these huge income disparities. You can't have certain people being allowed into the country during COVID and Bahamians being stuck in the UK like, LOL, what do we do? So I think one thing that is really impressive about what the Black Lives Matter movement is doing as well is that they're very clear about their intentions. And I like the whole defund the police movement to restructure and make sure that people in the most need are getting access and equitable access, just like everybody else in the country, is such an important part of that movement and like the way that it's evolved. And I think that that's something that we can also adopt here. I mean, it doesn't have to be defund the police, but there's also, you know, these movements for government to be more transparent. Where's the VAT money going? Why can't we see it? Why aren't we seeing these improvements in social justice around the country?
Hey guys, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I think, you know, the irony is that life can be so difficult for many Bahamians that the capacity to engage politically is not there, right? So when we hear people say, oh, well, look at, you know, what African Americans are going through, or you know, they make derogatory comments about Haitians. I think what it comes down to is, well, at least I'm not Black like them, right? At least my Blackness doesn't look like that. At least it doesn't feel like that. And so, you know, it definitely comes back to this distancing from Blackness that is detrimental to our progress, because there are some very tangible things that we can do to address racism in the Bahamas. You know, a couple of years ago, Gail Sanders was saying that she's been advocating for history to be a mandatory BGCSE. And I think, you know, that's something that we can do. We can look at the sources that our history textbooks are using, educate Bahamians about their history so that they know who they are fully. You know, I took history for 2 years. I took the history BGCSE, and there was still so many things that I did not learn, you know, and I think that's one thing that we can do. Another thing that we can do is make space for Bahamians to pursue career paths that aren't typically encouraged, right? So if we're serious about being anti-racist or combating white supremacy and kind of dismantling these systems, well, we have to encourage Bahamians to study psychology, to study sociology, to study areas that they can then teach in, that they can contribute to, fields that aren't directly related to tourism, right? And another issue with, I think, Bahamians studying these other fields is, as someone pointed out, actually filling our schools with Bahamian teachers, right? So one of the issues that a lot of UB students run into is well, someone isn't offering the course for my degree, so now I have to wait another year to take this course, and oh, my 4-year degree is now taking me 6-7 years, right? We should have students going in and out of UB, getting degrees in fields that are looking to be filled, right? Like, we need to make space for Bahamians to take up other occupations. And so there are definitely some things that we can do. And one of those things begins with rewriting the textbooks, right? Like, I remember my primary school social studies text, it did not give a very truthful account of what happened when Christopher Columbus arrived, right? So yes, okay, remove the statue, but also get these people back to the drawing board to rewrite these textbooks. You know, it's not enough to have a statue removed, or even the statues of other peoples. That's not really what we want. We want serious structural change, which means unlearning the ways that we've been thinking and living and relating to each other, and learning new ways of doing that. And so, you know, like, the reparations is a very exciting thing to think about and to work towards. But I think there is more that we can do in the meantime, you know, while we're working towards this. But I'm grateful for this conversation. And I will say my struggle with these kinds of discussions is that they're not reaching the people that need to hear them. Right? So, like, we're all interested in having this conversation, so we've tuned in, but this needs to be reaching people who aren't even thinking about these issues, you know? And again, maybe it comes back to not having the capacity to even have this conversation.
So may I say something?
Sure.
So I'm Dr. Ancelino Davis, and I run Science and Perspective. And a big part of the issues that I face as a scientist in the Bahamas, when you go off, everyone believes that you shouldn't come back home because there aren't opportunities for you in science. Or when they see someone doing science, they don't expect it to be a Bahamian. There's often situations where I'm in a room and I'm the Bahamian face, and someone else can come in there, you know, a white North American or a white expat from Europe, and people would accidentally call them Dr. such and such, whether or not they have a degree. And then for me, even after getting my doctorate, people consistently, you know, refer to me as Mr. Davis or call me by my first name, and don't provide me with that type of, you know, by recognizing me by my title. Also, we tend to look up to the foreign expert as being better than we are. And so there's this internalized racism and, you know, mistreatment or disrespect for locally grown or homegrown knowledge or information. And that's really difficult to combat because we're learning it in our schools regularly. And like you said, we have this this history of learning from textbooks that are written inaccurately by people who are giving us knowledge about ourselves or telling us this is what's happening in your country, and you don't have the qualifications to tell what's going on or to write your own story. So we're going to tell you what it is. We get it every time there's an environmental impact assessment, when there's a national plan that's being developed. We're getting external experts coming in to tell us what we should do, how we should do it, what's best for our country. And the Bahamas is different from everywhere. You know, we have these really interesting issues of a very tiny country that's also split up into hundreds of different little pieces and scattered throughout an ocean that makes logistics just so much more intricate and difficult. And someone's going to come from North America where you could drive between everywhere and they're going to say, oh yeah, this will work fine. No, it doesn't. You don't know what our lived experience is. And then at the same time, we have this, I always say, be careful how you treat Haitians, because that's how they will treat you when you go another latitude north. And it's really interesting how that plays out. And people would always tell me like, oh, you should stay in the US after you get your doctorate. But to be honest, in the Bahamas, I know there's racism, but it's not directed at me. And so when I'm in the States, it's interesting to be on the other side of it, and then you get that perspective, so you can actually treat people with more respect when you come back home. And also, I speak multiple languages, so when I speak when I speak Spanish in the States, it depends on where I am. If I'm in Florida, they'll think that I'm Cuban, or if I'm in DC, they think I'm Puerto Rican, and then if I'm in Mexico, they think I'm from the Dominican Republic. And it's really interesting that you get racism in different ways, depending on where I am physically, who I'm with, what language I'm speaking. And you can feel it at home, you can feel it abroad. I'm just more comfortable with the racism here.
I think the last three people who spoke really pointed to, sorry, I'll come right back to you. The last two people who spoke really pointed to this question of who the Bahamas is for. And I think if it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before, Juan McCartney on his show, The Revolution, he was like pissed off about the whole thing with the beaches, and did they really just open the beaches to let the tourists in, and multiple issues. But he really said, who is this for? And if the Bahamas isn't for us, then why are we Bahamian? And it really struck me, because we hold on to citizenship like it's so precious. It's a precious resource. We might run out of it. But what does it actually mean if this place that we've built isn't for us? Because the beaches apparently aren't for us to enjoy. The whole place is just sort of designed around entertaining tourists, who are presumably white people, majority white people. The jobs, the contracts, all these things, they're for expats, right? Not migrants. Big difference. Not for the migrants. It's for expats, not for Bahamians. The higher level jobs within hotels and all that, who are they for? Those are for the white expats. So who is this place for? And it shows you how racism is just across the board. It's woven into so many aspects of our lives. And it goes back to, I think it was Lauren who said it, talking about reparations, and that's something great to work toward, but we have more work to do on the way. So we don't just focus on the long term, but there are things that we need to do along the way as well, whether those are systemic or personal or institutional. There was somebody who was trying to jump in. Do it now.
Okay. So yeah, I think a lot has been said. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to be a part of this discussion is so that I think it's frustrating. It's frustrating to hear, I guess, what we already know and what everybody has been saying. And then you go back to your little corner and then you think about like life itself in this kind of country. And I think, well, Dr. Davis made an interesting point. I think we shouldn't be comfortable with racism anywhere, you know? And I think, like, I'm having a conversation with a professor at the University of the Bahamas, and I was saying to her, because you talk about, you know, we holding on to this citizenship. For a very long time, and I tell people this all the time, I've never felt like a Bahamian, and I've lived here all my life. I don't know what that is. I don't identify with that. And I think that it just has to do with the fact that if you have more privilege, like I think Dr. Davis was alluding to, then you can kind of hold on to some of these things that make you Bahamian. And even if they're just a little bit more than this person, you say, okay, well, this is my little piece of the pie of being Bahamian, and this is all I got. I'll take it. It may not be much, but this is all I have. And if it's John Canoe, then I'll take that. If it's Kong Salad, I'll take that. If it's me being from Long Island or Eleuthera and my family being born into some modicum of wealth, then I'll take that. And I think that that's where we kind of like get thrust into this kind of, if you would, matrix. And even we fall prey into this trap of thinking that, you know, I'm doing the best that I can with what I have. Why can't you? And because I haven't thought of myself as a Bahamian, even though I've lived here all my life, it's been very difficult not to be angry in this space. Not to be angry when I'm at the at McDonald's ordering a simple mac and cheese or a simple Big Mac, and telling them that I want the burger hot, and then you watch them serve a white person in front of you, and they have the most courteous service, and then for you they'd be like, so yeah, anyway, they just give you these orders, and it's like I do not get how we can look at each other in such a devalued kind of way. And it's so inherent in the way that we think. We talk about the history, right? That's been the issue, right? You talk about, I think Ms. Clinton, I think, was talking about the need for sociology, the need for these other courses and these other majors. I can tell you right now, because I'm almost done. I've just finished my history degree. I'm about to finish off my psychology degree in 2 semesters. And sociology has about 3 persons in the major. 3. And maybe about 3 to 7 people. Inside history, which is one of the degrees I'm finished, we have about 13 people. I think maybe less now. Psychology is bigger because it has about like maybe, you know, over 50, 100, 200 people. A lot of people sign up there. We are not running philosophy classes. We're not doing that. No one is studying philosophy in the Bahamas. And I'm like, so you talk about these other fields, but if you ask the number 1 major inside the number 1 and number 2 majors inside the University of the Bahamas, number 1 is business administration, and then the second one is tourism, management, and hospitality, which can include the culinary as well. And when you have a country that's fundamentally churning out those kinds of ideologies, this is what you get. You get this environment that is so repressive, so toxic, so oppressive, so much so that it makes me hard to breathe. I've been telling people for years, like, I feel like going out into society and hearing sometimes people talk the way that they think, it causes me to have this kind of physiological response as if I'm being choked in my own country. We keep talking about, you know, who's this country for? It's clear. It's just clear. And I'm at the point, like, when are we going to do something that, I guess, that moves just beyond calling it out? When are we going to do something that you know, really mobilizes? And honestly, I'm really glad, don't get me wrong, I'm really glad that we're having all of these discussions. And I'm really glad that we're having these ideas. But I go back to, I think Ms. Clinton brings up the point that unless we're able to kind of slip these ideas into a piece of legislation that can be taught in schools, this is all that it's going to come to. We're going to keep having these conversations unless we're able to slip these ideas into pieces of legislation that affect transportation, that affect housing, that affect all of these various kinds of things that affect the daily lives of Bahamians. Like all we're going to do is continue to have these conversations. Not that they're bad. It's just that only us are going to show up again, time and time again. And I'm just like, I come to these spaces because I want to hear, I definitely want a dialogue, but I want real passionate action. And you guys have been doing, I know all of you in this room have been doing that. But I always wonder, when is the time going to come for us as Bahamians to have a moment like we're seeing in the United States, where we refuse to be pandered to, we're not being placated anymore, and we take this thing by the horns and demand justice. We demand social justice, we demand restorative justice, and we will not stop. It doesn't stop at reparations because I think I was having a conversation and I'll end here. Like after you get the reparations, you still have to deal with the neoliberalist policies that they're enacting right now as we speak. Let's think about disaster capitalism, because right now, when COVID came, they had bills ready to push through without even us being able to read these bills. And these bills and these legislations are going to continue to affect us. When Dorian happened, the piece of legislation that they, the legislation that they enacted, I thought was so callous. It reeked of arrogance. It reeked of insensitivity and inhumanity. When now they can tell you evacuate a place. They will not pay for you to evacuate that place, and they will never pay for you to return home. And yet, this is the kind of place that we're living in, you know. And so I just wanted to offer that.
Hello. Hi.
Good morning, Anushka.
Oh, hi. Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the fabulous discussion. But I just wanted to echo some things that were said previously, and to get back to Black Lives Matter. Essentially, I lived in the U.S. for the last 12 years until I recently returned home last year. And so Bahamians have a very, like someone had already said before, specific, in terms of where they are in a bubble, because even though Blackness might be experienced differently through many different nations, you have to have the opportunity to be exposed, I guess, to racism and what that means, because your Blackness doesn't come off when you cross the waters or go on a plane. Your Blackness is there all the time. And like you said, no matter if you open up your mouth and you sound like you're from the Caribbean or whether you're Latino or whatever, that Blackness is still there. And so we as Bahamians or anybody else will experience that in the United States or anywhere else you go, anywhere else where you go. So that's one issue. The other issue is in terms of, someone had mentioned just generational wealth being, there's so much disparity. You have the generationally poor and you have the generationally wealthy. And just to speak on what someone had mentioned about, for example, who is it serving? For right now, unfortunately, many Bahamians are oppressed, but not only that, they're ignorant. And the wealth and is serving the 5%. And even 5%, whether they be white or Black, if they're getting disproportionately the advantages of, a society where you get, or, for example, where you live, the jobs, wherever you're able to socialize, whatever fact of society, education, for example, then they won't change that until we, meaning the people that actually, whether we're the 95%, speak out against that. And that is not going to change, because even though we hop on the issue, we talk about classism, but deep embedded in that classism is underlying racism. And because we know this because of colonialism and the fact that overwhelmingly we look at, like you all had mentioned, tourists coming here, those the white knights, bringing money, or the Bay Street Boys, the people that run, downtown and everything else, and all our different institutions which have been founded on the same issue of race and classism. And then I wanted to speak again on one other thing you had mentioned briefly about the mental health, or the health effects, of racism and slavery. And couple of things. As a health professional, I can't speak directly as to whether, what are the major, impact in terms of, the health per se, but we do know that there's significant disparities, whether it's here or in the United States or elsewhere, between people of color and Caucasians, for example. And we know that in terms of our attitudes toward help, seeking help, all of those behaviors, preventative health, stem from slavery, not having the opportunity to be treated, not having the opportunity to actually seek and get health care. So all of those things, and it also boils down to the practices that we had to actually adapt in terms of our eating habits, which is why we have rampant hypertension, diabetes, and all the other societal ills that come with the things that were embedded to us because of what we had to adapt to in terms of eating, our behaviors, and etc. So, I think there's a whole bunch of things that we need to discuss, but I also think that unless people, meaning we take up the mantle for those of us who are knowledgeable, no one will address these issues because unfortunately, the 5% or whomever you want to, however much it is, they are the ones that are benefiting and they are not going to want that to change.
Can I just say something really quickly in terms of the change, what we want to do to involve change? Like when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think I've admired since 2012 and like just been involved and loved to see, you have people going out in the street going against like police laying their lives on the line, like trying to stop that, trying to bring about change. When we talk about what are we doing as Bahamians to bring about change, is anyone going to a certain particular store in the mall and considering lighting it on fire? If they say they're not taking down the Columbus statue, are you going to paint it red? Like, what does the change look like? And I mean, at some point we have to call it what it is. We're calling for a revolution against anti-Blackness. So what does that look like in terms of being Bahamian? Because we as Bahamians have to challenge inside of us this respectability politics that have been placed on us based on whiteness and like just how we benefit from white tourism. So if we're going to say we need to do these things to change, does that mean there is a petition? Does that mean that we're going into the street? Does that mean that they're going to paint the Columbus statue red? What is the next move?
I think I just wanted to jump in now because I wanted to address something that Natino Thompson said. I completely agree. I feel you're passionate about this, and I think, but I do want to say is everybody sees We March as like sort of like a blight or like an embarrassment, but I actually see it as a first real tangible, maybe not first, but it was for me. It was a tangible look at that we have the capacity for revolution, and I'm not embarrassed by the people that literally put their bodies on the line in that hot sun. I was out there, I witnessed and I saw this movement and that energy, and I don't think while how it was led or how it was used may have not have been inauthentic, may have been misrepresented. You could have your different views on it. I feel as though personally everyone got exactly what they put in for that movement. I think when we have this way of engaging politically that we just select, we go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we select a leader and then we back off completely and let that person just do whatever the hell they want with the position of power that we've given them. So we don't really follow up. We don't really investigate even thoroughly the person that we've selected. So for me, We March was exactly what it said it was going to be. A mishmash, hodgepodge, an outlet for what was a complete, Bahamians have proven what they do when they've had enough. I mean, the impact of We March is demonstrable. You can see it in the parliament today. Now, are we suffering from that? Yes, we are, because we don't have an official opposition, and there's definitely a lacking in political representation widespread. But I feel as though taking We March as a win, we know that there is a way to reach the people, and that Bahamians are not happy with the way the things are. Now, how do we get to the next step? I think it takes a bit more personal accountability in each, and to the next thing that Antino said, he said he hates going, you're tired of going to these things, you want to see change. But I would just throw it to the group. What are y'all going to do when y'all leave this meeting? I mean, Latino, what are you going to do when you leave this meeting? Are you going to talk or share this link to the video for other people to see it? Are you going to discuss the themes that were brought up? How many people are you going to take it to your same group of people that believe the same thing? Or are you going to go out and try and engage others with this sort of conversation? And I think that's where we get to this point where we're like almost there. And then, it's hard to carry that. Alicia puts on this Women's Wednesdays every month, you know what I mean? And I try to support her, but this is probably like my third one for the year, if I'm being honest. It starts with not just coming to these meetings and engaging with each other, and it goes to the next step now. How are we influencing our interpersonal groups? How are we making sure that people feel uncomfortable being racist in front of us? How are we making sure that when we see things like the BGCSE, you know, how are we confronting that? Because you found that on Twitter. Is that you know, the next step is to find out, is that a curriculum question? When was the last time that question was on there? And these are things that we could personally do to sort of introduce more accountability. And I think like, right, so I just saw Orchid's comment. So sustainable organizing, because it's like, it's hard. You know, people that are doing this are privileged. They're in spaces of privilege. You know, to be as aware that I am is a privilege because I've worked in this field for 10 years. But if I wasn't a reporter, if this wasn't how I was also getting my money, would I still be this invested or this aware? You know, so I think I'm not daunted by that. I see a lot more people here today that I saw 10 years ago. And I think that we are moving forward. It might be so small that we can't see it, but we are, just the people in this room, like, have an impact on their communities. You know, like Nyambi, like Aaron, like Alicia, you know, and even like Dr. Davis. You know, you have quite a bit of impact just by doing what you're doing in your own spaces. And I think we need to stop looking for stuff like a hero to sort of come in, or we could put in a position of power that could make these things happen for us, and start literally just taking it back to community building, community outreach. Like we everything that we do now is a separation from community. Everything that our individual dream of Bahamian success is individual. You know, who owns land in your family? You know, the generational title that you hold that is under threat from the Quieting Titles Act because your family can't get it together, and stop arguing over who really can sell it. You know, all these things are interconnected. You know, and by sort of, and what is our goal? Is our goal just to be wealthy in terms of being able to borrow money and reduce our GDP, or is our goal that being able to feed ourselves? You know what I mean? So it's more than, I feel like the metrics for this progress that we want to see. Like, I feel like we need to change that too as well. Like, you know, we need to think about that as well.
Hello. I want to back the idea of owning this kind of cause in our personal spaces, and the space that I wanted to bring up is the religious space, the issue of the church in the Bahamas, where you see a lot of these issues played out, and something that I've seen in terms of over the years being highly involved from small, and seeing whatever degree of evolution there has been, and a wrestling, but a continued need to wrestle. The church was, of course, we know that the Christianity was brought here by the oppressors. But there's also the fact that there are certain denominations that came later on to the Caribbean and to the islands that came not to cater to the plantation class, but to cater to, or to minister to the enslaved class, which in some cases and in some islands also, those churches would have assisted and advocated for the abolition of slavery. But in the spaces where we have these discussions, I always remind us that in some ways we have come away from that first purpose that had a lot of good in it. The Bahamas itself is unique and special. I can speak from the perspective of the Methodist Church. In the Caribbean, we have the Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas. And the Bahamas is the only country within 8 districts that has more than one type of Methodist church. And it's because we had a split in the early 1990s. And this was a split that at the end of the day was rooted in racism, because we did not want the Bahamians that had the money and the power in the churches no longer wanted their money to be going out to foreigners. We have an itinerant system where we are transferred and foreigners are transferred in the Caribbean. They no longer wanted foreign ministers in their pulpit, and also Black Bahamian pulpits. Black Bahamian ministers were also driven out of pulpits during those years of, we call the crisis. So not, unless you're involved in the Methodist Church, you might not hear a lot about that. So the Bahamas is very special in that, and that is deeply rooted in racism, and that is something that has not taken root in that way, in that fashion, anywhere else in the Caribbean. And the church itself, most of the fundamental problems that affect the church affect the Black people, because we are by nature more populated with Black Bahamians and Black people in the Caribbean. And so I was talking about these conversations that we have in terms of our wrestling and this new generation of leaders, and forcing the church to confront issues. Who are the people that are now? I was saying that there are certain denominations that came to the enslaved class. And today we have persons that can also be named or recognized, like, who are the enslaved class? It's the Black Bahamian woman, right? Who doesn't have the same rights as the Black Bahamian man sitting in the church in the pew. And the church has a say over that. We've seen in the referendums, the voices that have been loud and the voices that have been quiet. That's the Bahamian Black woman, the queer Black people who are not made comfortable in spaces of worship, who are not welcome if they're not dressed in terms of gender specifications, and who are forced to be silenced, laypersons and clergy. It's the Black children who are raised not to be accepted in church with natural hairstyles as good enough to go to Sunday school or go to church. Women clergy who I've seen from I was small criticized for natural hairstyles, even twists. And here am I today in 2020 as somebody with locks and not bothered in the pulpit. Who else? The children, Black children, who fall prey to being groomed for persons in the church who would seek to prey on them, and further preyed on in terms of being silenced or not believed when they come forward. And so I'm saying that these are things that we continue to wrestle with, and in a lot of ways, it remains highly problematic, especially when sometimes the loudest voices coming from the church are definitely not the voices that are moving with progress. And we have something called Caribbean theology, where Marcus Garvey and those teachings and other persons like Reverend Ashley Smith have borrowed from the Black liberation theology in the States to form a theology of liberation for Black people. But again, it forgets in a lot of ways the Black woman, the Black Caribbean woman, the Black Caribbean child. And it goes back to what people were saying earlier about the oppressor, the oppressed, in some ways becoming the oppressor. And it's, I just want to say that that's something that the church is wrestling with. And it's something that is progressing. It's not progressing fast enough, but it's an issue. It's not something that a lot of people, I guess, know enough about to address, other than to grind the axe with the church. But it's something that's taking place, and it's important to have those conversations in your personal spaces, in your faith life, in your church, and to demand to be present and to take up space, no matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter where you come from. It's something that you can demand and know that you are right. And there'll be someone there. I hope there'll be someone there that will be on your side. Thanks.
If I could just jump in and make another comment, because I think both of the recent speakers, they talk about, I guess, the pace at which we're moving. And I genuinely, like, I've heard people on occasions, they'll say, well, change takes time. And I don't buy that. I do not buy into that narrative. And I'm sorry. Whenever you want something, you know what you do? You work towards it. You save up for the iPhone. You save up for this. You save up to go on the trip to the room. You save up for this, and you get it done. Right? That's the capitalist kind of mindset that they've ingrained in us. How is it that when it comes to change, oh no, that takes time, darling. You can't rush it. You can't rush it as if we're doing them some type of disservice. No, we're trying to save them from what we know to be a very exploitative system. And so, yes, as has been pointed out, like, the change is too slow. So what do you expect a surgeon to do when they come home? What do you expect someone who's an aeronautical scientist to do when they come home? The change is too slow. And granted, yes, I know that we're I guess we're pressed in terms of resources, and I'm talking about money, right? But if we really start to put our money where our mouth is and actually begin to do the work, my whole thing is about challenging us, and even myself first and foremost, that this can be done in my lifetime. That I don't have to die. I don't have to be like, and I've made a conscious decision. I will not be like Martin Luther King Jr. I don't have a dream. This is a vision that's gonna happen before I lay down in a coffin or I lay down in an urn. And that's the kind of mentality I have.
Mr. Thompson, I earned the right to interrupt you, right?
Go ahead, Dr. T.
So what question is, what does the change look like for you that happens now? What does it look like? I don't do that to pressure you or anything, but the word imagination has been really strong for me this month. With all of these issues, and thinking that imagination is a really powerful tool, right? And that sometimes what we simply need is the imagination to see something that is different from what we have right now. So using your imagination, what would that look like?
I envision a Bahamas where Bahamians are owning all of the industries, where we've moved away from oil, where we're using solar, we're using hydroelectricity, where we're using hydroponics, where we are in control of all of the necessary vehicles that make our life what it is, that we're sustainably feeding ourselves. I envision a Bahamas that has recognized that knowledge is colonial past and is reckoning with it every single day that they go, that Parliament meets, because it's one of the most pressing matters. I envision a Bahamas where education is one of the most fundamental aspects, and it's free straight up to university, where students are starting to earn a degree by grade 9. But so much so that similar to like Cuba, by the time they hit grade 12, they have either their first or bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. That's the kind of Bahamas I envision. I envision a progressive Bahamas who understands that because we are a majority of a Black nation, that we have the fundamental power to hold, to take a hold of our future and make it so that no Black person, that there's no inequality, there's no disparity or inequalities like the ones we see now. And I think that is a realistic goal. I envision a Bahamas where we're not worried about drilling for oil. We're not worried about that, but we're using our minds to create the kind of environment that we want to continue to uphold. I envision the Bahamas where our mangroves and our environmental kind of legislations are the best in the world, because we understand that mangroves hold the key to keeping the soil and keeping our land. I envision a Bahamas that understands it and actually qualifies Bahamians at all levels and at all industries, so that none of them are left in the state of disrepair and just not I guess dysfunction that we see happening. I envision a Bahamas.
What is the immediate action that happens now that we're not doing, that
I think
require for these things to happen? And I'm sorry, I really apologize to everybody that's here for joining so late. I don't know if these things have already been posed, but I mean, just saying, because I hear your frustration at the pace, but all of the things that you have mentioned require, I think, a mind shift for us to first understand what we have in our country. And that takes time. So what is the thing that could happen immediately?
I think that we could pass legislation that moves us 10 years, 20 years into the future. Because we're currently, I think, 10 to 20 years behind.
So then that would require people for you to be in the house to pass it, right?
Exactly. I was just gonna say, but I don't think that that's an immediate change either, because we live in a democracy, right? So any change that you make legislatively, I want to be able to have a debate about it. I think my question, but it seems the root of most of the things that you're advocating for can be achieved through political, by political advocacy. But what I would say is we have another 2 years before the next general election. Who in Parliament now sitting, or who in candidacy, because if they're going to be running for government, I would hope they would know that they're running for government by now. Who can we support that shares this ideology, that shares this vision? Which one of the 41 or how much ever are in there right now hold those kind of views, and who are we going to support? Because remember, we have a two-party system, and we also have a system that is very regressive. Where are the women? Where the reason the reason we're in this shit is because we don't have any women on the thing. Look how many women are in this chat right now. Where are they? Where are those voices?
We also had a woman MP deny marital rape.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because we don't investigate them. We don't hold them. We didn't ask her to have any views. We let the FNM, or we let the FNM put her out, and we voted for her. But did we ask or have any sort of when are we going to demand debates to hear what these people actually think? Sometimes the first time we hear them speak is in Parliament. And
so one thing that I do want to say though is that we've seen in COVID-19 how quickly we can respond and act when the political will is there. So we know it's possible to make radical change. What we also understand is that people who have the power only drive change when they're being impacted. This is what we're seeing around the world in this current COVID-19 state. I also do want to celebrate everyone who has been working, because there has been great progress. And I think about now, even looking at TikTok, the amount of Bahamians who are young Bahamians who are out and completely just like, I'm gay, I'm bi, just open. That wasn't a thing when I was growing up, and so yes, there is slow progress, but I really believe now more than ever, because our political system is defunct. And while we can do the best that we can operating within that political structure, I really believe it's going to require the private and public sector for us to mobilize and to become extremely strategic in how we drive our country forward. Because our government system is based on colonial systems, which is an oppressive system. The entire tourism development is designed to bring in foreign people so that we can, Orchid, I think, talked about it, 4:00 PI, like all the housekeeping staff leaving. So I think what we really have to reflect on is how can we as individuals work stronger and better together to support each other's efforts to dismantle the system. And that also means how can we create safe spaces to allow each of us to be able to catch a break, because this work is extremely labor intensive. I've been in, I don't know how many of these conversations today, and I'm mentally exhausted. And so one of the greatest things that we can do is support each other so that we have the energy to keep doing this work, because this work is not going to be driven by our politicians. It's going to be driven by us. And of course, if you want to go into politics, that's definitely a path that you can do that. One of the reasons why I've chosen not to is that the terms are so short. And when we're looking at creating and driving long-term change, you know, we need to find sustainable mechanisms that are not going to be thrown out when the party switches every 5 years.
I just want to chime in quickly about that. What Orchid said about, you know, people, staff at Atlantis leaving at 4 o'clock, right? Dr. Ian Strawn wrote a book in the early 2000s called Paradise Plantation that I did not come across until a couple of years ago. And I mean, it's still so relevant today, right? And more recently, Angelique Nixon published Resisting Paradise. And so I found those two texts to be very helpful in understanding how tourism operates, you know, through neocolonialism. And I feel like they would have been helpful in high school, right? So my thing is, we have Bahamians doing the work. How do we get future generations access to that work more quickly than we got that access, right? Because I mean, the other thing about the pace at which we're progressing is that climate change is very real. Like, unfortunately, small island nations like ours cannot wait for change. Like, we cannot wait for change. And these discussions that we're having about, you know, Haitians, Jamaicans, and other immigrants, some of these people are fleeing an environmental crisis. 3% of Haiti is forested. You cannot live in a place that is not forested. And so until the Caribbean and, you know, other regions around the world, particularly France and Europe, get serious about addressing these issues, we may find ourselves in the same situation in a couple of decades, right? We have to get serious about climate change.
I don't even think it's going to be a couple of decades. I mean,
Can I say?
maybe by September we'll be in recession. So like everything's coming home to roost rather quickly for the world, basically.
I mean, if you look at the global response to COVID-19, the expected response is that a global pandemic of this nature would warrant a global economic reset, right? That smaller nations, developing nations are going to be so impacted by this that there's no expectation of them ever regaining any ground economically. But not just that. Why wouldn't why wouldn't America, the G8 countries, demand a global economic reset, considering the devastation to their economies? Well, one part of it is that we're not going to be treated the same way that they're going to be treated, right? We've already seen Moody's and S&P making proclamations, but we don't see the same proclamation about the American economy, even though they owe China trillions of dollars, right? So this sort of expectation that the international community, the global North countries are going to step up and do the right thing. Like, we really gotta assess that, right? And whether that's actually going to happen. And we got to start doing the work, not just the work of writing the books like Ian Strawn and Angelique Nixon, but doing the work of Dr. Paul Campbell Dean, you know, teaching the work. But we got to invest our money in libraries and in bookstores, right? So young people can get access to the work. We got to plan the food, right? So people could eat, so they could read the work and understand it.
No,
all these young people.
I totally agree. My thing is, I wish I had gotten to the work sooner. You know, growing up in Nassau, you see Atlantis, at least when I was growing up, as a place to have fun, right? But through reading their books and just gaining a better understanding of the ways in which capitalism operates, I look at Atlantis's ads about Bahamas at heart differently, right? Like, we literally have a tourism industry that is claiming to be representative of the entire Bahamas. And
No, it's not.
consumers.
Stop. No. It's not. Pause. It's not claiming to be, right? Like, I wish you'd had access to the book sooner. I wish we had created cultures, pockets of cultures, where we prioritize these types of discussions. But there's never been a Bahamian tourism product that focused on Bahamians. Even the Bahama campaign, I'm a Bahama citizen. Like, that was some treacherous, nefarious, let me use some nationalism to get these people on my side in the campaign against the government without giving them any real support. They don't have a union, right? You won't let them, you create obstacles to them unionizing.
Speak it.
No, but what I'm saying is they claim to do that, right? So in saying, oh, Bahama citizen, right, that's a false narrative. We know that not to be true. And so, you know, when I've seen imagery used by Ministry of Tourism or Atlantis, they claim to be representing the Bahamas, right? As like, this is the real Bahamas. You can come and vacation at Atlantis and get an authentic experience. That's what I'm trying to get at.
No, man, because listen, okay, so here's what I want to say. Like, I can take the fault, right? I'm 45. I can take the blame for, not taking more of the space that I've had in the public media to create an environment where younger people could see through those illusions, right? I was a part of the Spot improv comedy troupe 5-6 years ago when a young lady had gone through the interview process at Atlantis with locks. She got the job. She was told she's starting orientation the next day. And the next day she got to orientation. The first thing they asked is when she cutting her locks, right? We did this skit about Atlantis. It's a plantation, right? And so maybe your elders haven't done the work of pushing away those illusions. But what I'm trying to say is they weren't even trying to create a facade, right? Like, they didn't even care how you felt about it. It had nothing to do with you, the marketing of tourism in the Bahamas, because it's a plantation model system. You, the Bahamian, who literally provides the product with your body, right? You serving the drinks and you smiling and you leading people back. They don't care about you. It had nothing to do with you. All they did was create a sense of identity and self as a Bahamian, that I'm a good ambassador, right? Like, I'm a good servant and a good ambassador to these people. That's what they spend a lot of energy doing. But it doesn't serve us. And we're not even a part of creating the image of paradise, right? Some white people or some ontologically white people sit down in a room and they think about what other white people think paradise is. And they create those images. And that's why even with the absolute over directive that you're creating a staycation, a tourism campaign for Bahamians, you still couldn't figure out how to put black people in it. Black Bahamians had to complain for you to realize that maybe if you are creating campaigns for locals, that you should put some locals in it.
Yeah,
right?
And it's black people's bodies are going to be on the line. Well, are on the line now as of today, July 1st, right? We know that most of our tourists come from the U.S. They're coming from, COVID-19 is spiking in the U.S., especially in Florida, which is 40 minutes from here by plane. And it's going to be black people who work in hotels, who drive taxis, who are going to be on the front lines of that. And that's just okay so that we can get a couple of dollars into the economy, but it's okay because it's black bodies, I guess. All of this, we've spread pretty wide and didn't go particularly deep, but all of these issues that we're talking about, climate, tourism, the economy, is all tied back to race. And I think Nyambi's asking a question in the chat about there's a lot of power in the conversation. There's a lot of emotion that we're hearing from people who are contributing. So what do we do next? What are the action steps? And I'm going to ask Ava to use the chat to tell people more about what she's trying to organize and specific things that people can do. And for those of you who are interested in actually doing something beyond the conversation, conversations really get a bad rap around here. But if you're interested in doing something beyond the conversation, just drop in the chat what your skills are, what your interests are, so that we know who's ready to do what, and that would be really helpful. But at this point, we are 9 minutes over time. We'll go a little bit longer just to get this part in. Nyambi, I want to pull you in on this part where we talk about healing, because there's just been so much anger and frustration expressed here, some grief. How do we keep doing this work when we're tired and stressed? And as a couple of people mentioned, we have our daily whatever's going on, family stuff, work stuff, and then somehow some of us still find time to get into social justice stuff and having difficult conversations and taking actions like protests. How do we take care of ourselves while we do this? Is there anything that we have access to without having a ton of money?
So I think with all self-care, the first is awareness, right? So sometimes when you are a mover or where you are someone that gets involved, your normal is 10, and you don't realize that you might just need to sit down until your body sits you down. So I think taking concerted efforts to check in with yourself every day and see how you are actually feeling. I'm a really big fan of emotional freedom tapping. It's called EFT tapping, and it sounds much kind of complicated, but if you go on YouTube, you can find a whole bunch of links to just EFT tapping exercises, and they basically can just kind of calm your nervous system down in periods where you're feeling high stress. Lots of deep breathing techniques. But I think that you have to begin to put that into your daily routine, right? So if your daily routine is wake up, check your email, maybe get something to eat, then go, you have to schedule it in and make it a part of what you do, and recognize that your cup has to be full in order to pour into your community. So, but y'all know that, just a matter of doing it, right?
Yeah, and figuring out how to do it and fitting it in our day the same way we fit in picking up children from school and sending emails and whatever else. Sometimes it's scheduling. And before we close, Nikita wanted to jump in and lead us in a little something to make us, give us a little balm for the wounds that we might have reopened in this conversation. Nikita, are you still there?
You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I think it's really important that when we open up these wounds and we talk about really triggering things, that we close them so that we don't go into our families or loved ones and are just like raging people because we're so triggered because of everything that we experienced, and which is real. So I just wanted to walk us through a little grounding activity, and you can open your eyes, you can close your eyes, but I just want you to get comfortable, whether you're in your seat, have your feet on the ground, and just really feel the contact that your feet are having on the ground. And I want you to take a deep breath in and then out. I want you to imagine that your feet are either you're in the ocean and your feet are in sand, or your feet are on dirt. And I want you to really imagine that connection that you have with Mother Earth. It's a connection with yourself, because you are nature. All of us are nature. We can take another deep breath in and a deep breath out. I now want you to imagine a ball of energy right at the bottom of your feet, just underneath your feet. This is all the amazing energy, the life force that is this planet Earth that we are intricately connected to. And as you take this next deep breath in, I want you to imagine that flowing all the way up through your legs, through your chest, up into your neck and out the top of your head. Another deep breath in, pulling from the earth. And this time when you release, I want you to breathe out with a smile. And you're imagining a waterfall of love flowing down over your body and pooling right again at your feet. We're just going to do 2 more breaths, breathing in from that ball of energy that is Mother Earth. Breathing in all the way up. Feel that energy above your head and breathe out with a smile. And let that love just flow in and around you. It's a constant reminder of how loved you are, how supported you are, and that you can always tap into this unconditional love whenever you're feeling charged. So just 1 more deep breath in. And as you breathe out, see that waterfall of love just pour out of the top of your head, all around your body as it pools in your legs. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and know that you are exactly where you need to be. You are here right now, showing up, standing up for yourself, standing up for your friends, your family members, working towards bringing about equity and justice. And you are so valuable. You are loved, and we cannot do this work without you. Thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Nikita. And thank you to everyone for joining the conversation. Remember that Women's Wednesdays is a monthly event hosted by Equality Bahamas. And the next one will be August 5th, likely from 6 to 8 again. That's our usual time. Probably still on Zoom because we're going to keep going with the social distance life to keep ourselves and each other safe. And we will be talking about personal finance. So get ready, get your questions together on how to save, how to invest, how to manage difficult times, whatever your questions are, bring them with you. Thank you for being here again, for being a part of the conversation. Please do not underestimate the power of conversation and being able to share ideas and ask questions and challenge one another's positions. It's really important, and it's really a starting point. It's not the end. So take this conversation to your dinner tables and your WhatsApp groups, the same way that you share whatever else. Share this. It doesn't have to be the video, but talk about what you heard here. Find out what other people think and figure out how you're going to take action. And I really encourage you to get in touch with Ava to find out about the organizing that's taking place and how you can move this forward. There's always more to do, and it doesn't mean that the thing that you're doing is not important. So just keep that in mind and have a good night.